To say that these stories have been difficult to come by might be sugarcoating it. Up until a few years ago, I had always assumed that my grandmother's family was filled with a bunch of alcoholics or petty criminals. Something vaguely tragic, but hardly interesting enough to warrant juicy gossip. Asking after them would usually make my already cold grandmother clam up and either deliver a smack to the wrist or tell you to go play in the yard, read in traffic. Recently though, she started to open up about her strange past. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe she realized that after all of these years of running from it, that world has finally died off. Maybe she has actually begun to look back at her life and miss what she had. I don't really know, and I guess it's not that important. What is important for you, Axe, is that my grandmother ran away from the circus, and not just any circus. She ran away from a traveling medical show. As always, I make no claims toward the truth behind these stories. Most of these are cobbled together from my great-grandfather Max's journal and the notes of his brother Arthur. Max may or may not have been somewhat of a drunk, and Arthur really only wrote about things his good nature and soft heart would never allow him to speak out loud. My grandmother gave my brother and me these journals a few summers ago, and I was hoping to get some scanned pages for you, but if I keep waiting for my brother to do that, you may never get to hear these stories. What I do know for certain is that these people did exist. I've changed around some of the names and locations to protect those involved because it is surprisingly easy to Google them. So, whether or not you choose to believe Max's stories, know that he is real, as is the show and the performers mentioned. The only thing I am adding are some adjectives, transitions, and the supporting details that my researching drummed up. The stories included are only a few from the years and the years they spent on the road. These are the ones I find most X-related, and in some cases, most disturbing. I will start before my grandmother was born. If you like these stories, I will continue. If not, that's fine too. While I'm no expert on anything relating to circuses or performances therein, here is what I know. Max and Arthur were brothers. Max was a bear of a man who spent his youth winning boxing championships and had hands so fast his favorite game was to dodge the hammers of men driving tent stakes into the ground. Arthur was more sensitive, a gifted musician and talented gymnast. Both were absolute gentlemen, and both loved to put on a show. The brothers somehow fell in with a man who went by the name of Dr. Dumont, like the cafe in New Orleans. The doc, as they called him, was likely not a real doctor, but he prided himself in his traveling show of medical wonders. The show featured acupuncture, herbal remedies, medical oddities, and the usual circus acts to catch the less scientifically minded. Arthur and Max performed as magicians, acrobats, clowns, assistants, barkers, and anything else that the doctor needed, while other performers included an amazing trick rider, a man who performed with bears and dogs, a sword swallower / fire breather, and a psychic. Over their years together, Dumont came to appreciate the fact that Max and Arthur's many talents made them valuable allies, while the brothers came to appreciate the fact that the doc was a couple of rings short of a circus. The doctor was forever hunting down medical oddities, if not to recruit them, then at least to examine them. While he may not have held a medical degree, by the end of his life, no one could claim that they knew more about the abject horrors the human body could produce. So, when Max answered a knock on his wagon one early August morning, his stomach had good reason to lurch with unease. "Max, my boy," the doctor greeted, "we have an errand to run. If you need a title, you can call this one The Doctor's Orders or What Became of That Unfortunate Soul. I don't know why you would, but I think that's pretty catchy, right?" Unlike the larger circuses that dominated the railroads, the little medical show still puttered along in the old ornate wagons and trailers. This made travel much harder, but allowed for the doctor to make his own curious, meandering paths. Max often wondered how his life had been hitched to every whim of this strange little man. But, as Arthur reminded him, if he really cared that much, they could have just quit. This particular detour had led them to a small town in eastern Iowa. A brutal drought left the fields near scorched, and summer heat made the small crowd sluggish and irritable. The morning sun had only just begun to crawl above the treetops, and already Max felt his shirt clinging to him. The dog wore his standard three-piece suit and kept time with a polished cane. The old man rarely ever showed the wear and tear of the roads, probably because his trailer had an icebox. As they made their way on foot, Dumond informed Max that this was a house call. He was responding to a letter mailed by a desperate family, seeking help for their unfortunate child. And why had he brought along the former boxing champion? Simple. It was a precaution, rest assured. The young man had his doubts, but the farmhouse they were aiming for was no more run down than any other lonesome homestead in the middle of nowhere. As they approached, a solitary donkey sounded the alarm, and his braying brought the owner of the house outside the door. He was a short, stout man with a weathered face and an unnaturally tired look. Max thought he saw others peering through the windows at them, but after very brief introductions, they were led away from the house and over to a storm cellar. "Heard about you coming to Des Moines last season," the man explained. "Thought you might be able to do something about this." He threw back the cellar doors and led them down into the darkness. It was difficult to see much of anything, with nothing but the morning light shining in to guide them. The stench down below was unreal. The unmistakable odor of rotting meat and feces reminded him of a neglected monkey that he had once seen locked in a barren cage. The only thing that kept him from gagging was the fear that the smell would get into his mouth. And even the decorous doctor covered his nose with a handkerchief. Once Max's eyes adjusted to the lack of light, he realized that there was a pile of badly stained blankets near the wall to the left, amidst piles of dung and fly-ridden scraps that he could not identify. The farmer took a rake that had been resting near the stairs and poked at the lump. The thing that shot out from beneath the blankets was such a confusing flurry of limbs that even Max had a hard time understanding what he was seeing. It was human, though really only by technicality. The boy crawled about on 4 twisted limbs, but a 4th and 5th leg jutted out from his midsection and right thigh, respectively. Though shriveled, these forgotten appendages twisted and flexed as he scurried about. His mouth was torn by a severe cleft palate, though that did not stop him from hissing and snapping with teeth grown long and somehow sharp like rodent incisors. He was naked but covered in sores, grooves, mud, shit, and rust-colored stains Max did not want to think about. One eye bulged out slightly, causing it to look off in a different direction, though the odd shape to the iris raised doubts over its ability to see anyway. The boy darted wildly to the end of the rope that had been tied around his neck and presumably anchored somewhere out of sight. He nearly choked himself trying to reach for the 3 men, and when that did not work, he resorted to spitting and finally pissing at them. "Don't have a right mind," the farmer said as he stepped away from the spray. "It's our second boy, but you can see why we keep it down here. Eats just about anything and doesn't do much but raise hell. Killing it would be a sin against the Lord, though." Max had to hold his tongue to keep from asking what that made keeping the boy alive down here. Very unfortunate, Dumond agreed. He kept his face covered with the handkerchief, but leaned in close as he could without getting hit. For a terrifying moment, Max thought the dog might actually take the boy. While he understood wanting to put it out of its misery, accepting the thing instead meant trying to integrate it into the show, and that meant that Max would have to deal with it. "I'm sorry," Dumond said finally. "While this is a very sad case, I am afraid I have no room for such a child in my show." "What?" the farmer asked. His look of detached exhaustion gave way to a visible wave of grief and then rage. "You said you handled this kind of thing. You take these monsters off of folks' hands. Now take this away." The man's rising tone made his son launch into a frenzy of yowling and jumping. Max was more focused on the rake the farmer was brandishing, however. He stepped between the farmer and the doctor and took in a deep inhale. He instantly regretted doing so, but at least it puffed out his chest and straightened his spine. The farmer was no weakling by the looks of him, but Max was well over 6 feet and nothing but muscle. He stared the man dead in the eyes. "Now, the doctor said there was nothing we can do. We're real sorry about your son, but that's all there is to it. If you don't mind, we will be going now." Max let his words hang in the foul air between them for a moment before waving his hand for the man to lead them out. The farmer looked as though he might argue, but swallowed whatever bile he had brewing and said not a word to them as they took their leave. The only response of a farewell that the doc got was a spit straight into the dust. The pair got the message and wasted no time getting back on the road and putting the house far behind them. "Such a shame," Dumond murmured as the safety of their tents slowly came into view. "Such a poor child." "I'm glad you didn't take it though," Max admitted. "I would have made you carry that thing back." If the story ended here, I'm sure that everyone would have a good laugh, learned a little something, and the credits could roll safely. Obviously, that is not the case. This was not nearly the last time Max and Dumond had to deal with the unfortunate. Their troubles were only just beginning. The next night, Arthur was called to the ticket booth by one of the few roadies that traveled with them. Max was tied up, helping with the beers, and Dumond had no interest in dealing with the ordinary nuisances of running the show. He approached the depressingly short line and was directed to a wooden box sitting off to one side. "A wagon rolled up and dumped it off here," the roadie explained. "They ran off before we could stop them. Things split open and some kind of animal jumped out, but crawled off into the bushes faster than we could catch it." "What kind of animal?" Arthur asked, but the roadie only shrugged. "Didn't get a good look. It didn't look like a dog though, too big to be a cat. One lady said it might have been a person, but who knows." "Box's firewood then, I guess," Arthur replied. Secretly, he hoped it was a monkey. Arthur loved monkeys and never did understand why their show had horses, mules, bears, birds, and dogs, but not a single monkey, especially now that Ringling had Gargantua the gorilla. Later in the evening, once everything had been closed down for the night, he mentioned this to Max. Max went pale and stared at his brother as if he had grown a third eye. "Was it a person, did they say? Was there a man in that wagon?" "I'm sure there was a man in the wagon," Arthur answered. "Someone had to drive it." Max was in no mood to argue with his brother. Instead, he rushed off to Dumond's trailer, and Arthur followed close at his heels, demanding to know what was going on. When Max gave a hurried explanation, Art shut up and helped pound on the doc's door. Dumond listened to their concerns with his usual stone-faced quiet. When they finished, the older man smoothed out his heavily waxed mustache and nodded. "Gather the dogs. Tell the young ladies to remain in their wagons. Search the area for it. But if you find nothing, then I suppose that we have nothing to worry about." Max roused Carl, the dog and bear trainer. Carl was a short man who loved alcohol and had been occasionally accused of letting his beloved bears drink with him. His dogs came in all shapes and sizes, and though he insisted during the act that they were all purebreds, he had once admitted to Arthur that they were nothing more than strays he could not possibly turn away. They gathered up the 4 largest mutts and a couple of guns, and met up with the other roadies Arthur had called out. The only woman among them was Ellen, the token bearded lady, who was probably at least as strong as half the men there, and refused to be left out of the fun. "We're looking for something," Max tried to explain. "You will know it when you see it. Just be careful." "That narrows it down," Arthur muttered, helpfully. They took up lanterns and fanned out through the brush surrounding the campgrounds. They'd taken up a temporary residence in a lightly wooded area on the outskirts of the small town. Much to Max's dismay, there were plenty of places for an evil little monster to hide, and every rushing bush or snapping twig made him jump a good foot in the air. He was not entirely sure what the boy could actually do to them, but the pit that was weighing down his stomach told him nothing good could come from this situation. Unfortunately, he did not have to wait long to find out. 2 men's screams shattered the nighttime stillness, and Max and Carl went racing towards whoever was yelling. One voice rose above the other in obvious agony, and the pair tore through the bushes, fueled by instinctive panic. They arrived close behind another search group, but that did not stop Max from nearly getting clubbed by a hammer. He broke my hand, a roadie leaning against a tree wailed. My hand! There was a monster on you, the one with the hammer insisted. Max took the weapon away from him. The man's eyes were wide with shock and terror. And then you broke my hand, the injured man yelled. The man had more than a broken hand to worry about. According to the pair, a monster had rushed out of the bushes and attacked the man, clawing like a monster and ripping a good chunk out of his arm. In an effort to save his friend, the roadie had swung blindly, but was too slow to connect with the creature and instead had shattered the poor victim's hands. Max fought back to the conditions the boy had been held in, and did not have the heart to tell the men about it. He ordered everyone else back to the camp. Searching the brush in the dead of the night was just going to get more people hurt or worse. Instead, they opted to lock doors, sleep with guns, and get the hell out of this place as soon as dawn hit. With all the yelling and nervous energy in the air, every animal in the show was riled up beyond hope, and the humans were not all that much better. Max and Arthur found themselves sitting up in their trailers, playing cards, and casting nervous glances out the window. Why would they dump that thing on us? Arthur asked. Because they're cowards, Max replied. They are probably hoping we'll kill it for them, and that we can go to hell instead. Is it really that bad? His brother asked. You can let me know if you get a good look at it, was all Max would say. Sometime after midnight, they had both managed to doze off. Max was fading in and out of restless dreams, and the incessant barking of Carl's dogs kept jarring him back to the waking world. He had almost gone under for the last time when a sudden sharp yelp of pain and vicious growling made him leap out of his bed and grab his gun. Both he and Art flew out of the trailer, but though they were the closest and first to respond, they were already too late. In the moonlight, the unfortunate was even more hideous than in the dark of the cellar. Its twisted spine heaved and pressed unnatural ridges against its skin, and the greasy, patchy hair on its head hung in oily ropes down to its shoulders. What skin was not covered in blood and filth was a sickly white gray, and its vestigial limbs were flickering wildly in the air. The monster had gotten one of the small dog's cages open, and it was in the process of ripping the poor animal to shreds. When the boy jerked his head up to look at the brothers, the dog's neck tore with a wet, meaty rip. The animal continued to try to yelp, but the only sound it could make were gurgling, trembling gasps as it shook and bled out. Max was too stunned to quickly reach his gun, but another figure was on the scene. Carl took one look at what the boy had done to his beloved dog, and the little man's face actually grew red with wild fury. While the unfortunate was distracted by the brothers, Carl took the opportunity to jump onto its back. The thing thrashed and howled, trying to buck the men off, or at least get in a good gouging bite. But this was a trainer who routinely wrestled bears, both friendly and not. Carl bellowed out obscenities and slammed the boy's misshapen skull into the remains of the cage, and when those gave way from the pummeling, he pounded the monster into the earth instead. There was finally a sickening crack as the unfortunate skull split from the force. When Max and Arthur finally dragged Carl off of the boy, only his frail, shrunken limbs still flexed reflexively at the night air. By this time, the whole camp was awake and watching the commotion. Dr. Dumond made his way through the small crowd to look upon the remains of the fight. There was still a strip of the small dog's neck between the boy's rodent-like teeth, and Carl was now covered in blood and whatever else had been on the child. He was panting and staring at the body of his pet, making no effort to fight the brothers as they pulled him away. Pools of human and animal blood soaked into the dry ground beneath them. What a shame, Dumond said, shaking his head. I'm so sorry, Carl. Max, when you get a moment, carry the body to my office, if you please. The doctor's office was a wagon where he held many of his exhibits, at least the ones that were not living. The walls were lined with shelves filled with glass jars, and odd creatures pinned to the walls like grotesque butterflies. There were some workers who refused to set foot in the place, but after so many years, the brothers had grown accustomed to the good doctor's collection. Max had to wrap the corpse in a blanket to avoid touching the filth, and ignoring the smell and the unpleasant stiffening setting in by the time he gathered the courage to pick the monster up was no easy task. The doctor, however, could not have been more pleased. Not 2 days later, the stuffed and posed corpse had a place of honor on the wall behind his desk. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. I'm from Moscow. I'm over 30 years old now, but there is this story that I will never forget. I was 16 back then, and it was me, Sasha, Grinya, and some friends. We got stuck in the metro one night on the Circle line. This was in the late 90s, and nobody really cared about keeping an eye on things back then. We had flashlights, a few sandwiches, water, cards, some newspapers for wiping or making a fire, matches, and pocket knives. Basically, we were all geared up to fight off the metro rats, or so we thought. There were 3 of us, and we managed to sneak into the tunnel unnoticed in the evening when it was quiet. We jumped onto the tracks and took off, half expecting security to come after us, but no one did. If a train had come, we could have hugged the walls. Luckily, we were still small and skinny, so we would fit. We walked about 100 meters before ducking into a side tunnel that you can see from the trains. The adrenaline was insane, but the deeper we went, the scarier it got. We were not having fun anymore. It was pitch black, except for our flashlights lighting up the walls. You could hear the distant rumble of trains and the eerie hum of pipes running along the walls. I was walking and thinking, what the hell am I doing here? I must be crazy. I could have been hanging with a girl or playing dende. My friends were silent too, and we just kept going. Time passed, and still no station, no exit. That's when I noticed the rust on the rails. Trains had not been through here in ages. I pointed this out to the others, and the others saw it too. Grinya, who got us into this, tried to act tough, like we were cowards, but I could see in his face that he was just as scared. Typical team bravado. We stopped to rest and sat down. It was almost midnight by then, just us in the dark with nothing but the sound of our breathing. The flashlights barely cut through the tunnel. It was pretty surreal. We were debating what to do. Keep going? We had no idea where the next station was, and sleeping on the rails was not exactly safe. So, we decided to press on for an hour and see if we could find a better spot to crash. If not, we would turn back. Then, suddenly, the flashlights could not find the walls anymore. The beams just disappeared into open space. We had found a platform, a station, completely abandoned. No decorations, no signs, just concrete pillars, a high ceiling, and dust several centimeters thick. There was no second track, just a blank wall, and the tracks we came from ran through the station, ending at a tunnel blocked by a grate wrapped in barbed wire. Above it, there was a small opening about 3 meters up, too tight for any of us to squeeze through. We shined our lights through the bars and could see the tracks continuing beyond. We were relieved to have found a place to rest. Exploring further, we found a stack of old army crates near one of the columns. We dusted them off, hoping they held something cool like guns or gear, but no, empty. The wood was rotten though, so it made perfect firewood. We broke the crates down and set up a little campfire by the edge of the platform, played cards, ate some food, and joked around. Our fear was completely gone. It was around 2 a.m. when we decided to sleep. Our plan was to wait until morning, get back to the Circle Line tunnel, wait for a train to pass, then make a quick run for the station and head out. We lay down in the dark with just the glow of the dying embers. That is when a scream jolted me awake. Disoriented, I had no idea where I was. The scream turned into cursing. It was Grynia. I could see light flashing in my face. Sasha had turned his on. Grynia was sitting next to him, holding his leg. "Are you crazy? That hurts like hell." He showed a hole in his pants and a bleeding wound. Sasha, half whispering, said, "It wasn't me. I was asleep. Max, are you screwing with us?" I could barely get my hands to stop shaking long enough to turn on my flashlight. "I didn't do anything," I stammered. Then, all of a sudden, Grynya's angry voice got drowned out by hysterical laughter from above us. "What the hell is that?" Sasha screamed. "Run." I finally managed to switch on my flashlight, and what I saw gave me chills. Fog had started swirling around us. The laughter was now completely unhinged. Sasha bolted into the tunnel, and Grynia looked at me with pure terror. I could barely stand. My legs were giving out, but Grynia grabbed my hand, and we took off after Sasha. The laughter was joined by roars, like something straight out of a nightmare. It reminded me of playing Left 4 Dead, hearing that hunter's growl before you get attacked. I yanked Grynia along, and despite the wound in his leg, he ran pretty fast, even though he'd lost his flashlight. I don't know how long we ran, but eventually, we caught up with Sasha, who was sitting against the wall, crying. I kicked him to snap him out of it, and we all just stared at each other, too shaken to speak. We walked back towards the circle line in total silence. We did not make it out unnoticed. Grynia needed medical help, so as soon as the train passed, I ran to the nearest station for assistance. There were some cops there, and a doctor or someone took care of Grynia. We got roughed up a bit, but nothing too serious. An old man who seemed to be in charge said we were lucky to have made it out alive. Apparently, people often disappeared down there. He did not say anything more. That's my story. Sorry if it's all over the place. Just thinking about it makes me shake. Got a personal experience to share. Would love some input on what you guys think I saw. Some quick background. I grew up in the northeast US, in a smallish town. Not rural, but super urban. Our house was in a more hilly and wooded area of the town, a few miles from downtown. Old farms around, postcard New England woodland. Be me, first grader in early fall, playing outside with two of my younger brothers in the front yard. Around 6:30 to 7 p.m. Kind of dusky. Mom calls us in for dinner. We run up to the front porch leading to the front door, and I had a rubber snake toy in my hand. Whip it behind me into the grassy central part of the yard. Had a wraparound driveway with a yard in the middle. Me and brothers turn around to watch how far it went. See where it landed. See a shadowy, black-looking figure standing exactly where the snake landed, approximately 3 to 4 feet tall, half blended in with the dusk. Glowing, orangish eyes staring right at us. We all scream and stumble over each other, piling through the front door, all in tears. Look back outside, nothing to be seen. Go outside the next day, and the snake was cut into 3 pieces. This is the first time we saw it. We are adults now, and remember this exactly the same. I'm the only one to have seen it twice. Story to follow. Story 2. This happened 5 years later. At this point, we moved across town to a larger house, more wooded, on the edge of a town forest, dead-end neighborhood, surrounded by hundreds of acres of woods and a few quarries deep in the woods. At this point, I have completely put out of my mind my previous experience. At a friend's house for his birthday party, midsummer, 7:30 to 8 p.m. Dusk again. Around 10 of us outside, playing teamed manhunt. Me and birthday boy run into the woods and find a large, downed tree trunk to hide behind, hiding for a couple of minutes when all forest noise is stopped. No wind, no birds, that sort of very unsettling silence you don't find in the woods during the summer. Friend and I look at each other once we noticed the stillness. Look behind us. About 30 yards behind us, we see the same shadowy figure staring at us, simultaneously there, but not. Glowing eyes, amorphous being. Nope the ever-loving fuck out of there, screaming and crying. Leave the tree line, and noise comes back. Yell for everyone to get inside. Spend the night playing Vidya, trying to forget. It was at this point that I connected the dots to the original experience. Both times, I felt what I can only describe as a primordial fear. To this day, I get a hair-raising feeling when thinking about it, and until a few years ago, my eyes would water just talking about the experience. I saw a psychic/medium/healer back in college, and she said it was an energy/being watching over me, keeping me from harm, but I'm not sure I buy that. I know things come in threes, and ever since I was a kid, I have been terrified of what it means if I see it again. One more sighting/experience, whatever you want to call it. Not related to the previous two, but happened in the same area. As said before, houses at the edge of hundreds of acres of town forest. Used to be farmland, but nature reclaimed it after 1830. Edge of our property was an old stone wall, used for a livestock of some sort. Many fond memories of exploring the woods in day and night, LARPing with airsoft guns, fantasy roleplay with sticks, etc. Quality childhood .D&D. Summer vacation. Outside playing. Start to walk down the rock wall towards the pond in our neighborhood, only a quarter mile away. Can still see our house through the trees. What happened next took place in about 15 seconds, real time. Walking, not really paying attention. Forest gets silent, and I smell something sweet, sort of like lavender, but with something else I've never been able to identify. World seemed dipped in a light sepia hue. 3 massive, light brown, dog-shaped things dash in front of me, right over the rock wall, like they jumped over it, directly in front of me. As soon as they cleared the wall, the world returned to normal. Smell gone. No animals visible anywhere. Book it, Mach 10 to the house, and run inside, freaking out. Never had any explanation, and haven't had anything major happen since. Not terribly scary or life-threatening, but these 3 experiences have stuck with me, and I am always conscious of the power of the woods and things we cannot see or understand.